Hey everybody. We're gonna get back to our Molly book today. We're on chapter 5, and if you know, you know that my dollhouse is down in the garage area, and it's getting colder here. It's down in. We're supposed to get in the teens on Thursday and Friday of this week, and I just thought it'd be nice to be warm today, and I would do it in front of my little Christmas tree. If you don't know, my tree is from Dollar Tree. It's the two $5 trees I zip tied together. Most of my ornaments are Dollar Tree, Walmart, or I've had for years. Dollar Tree, Walmart, had for years. Um, yeah. So just to show you my tree, thrifting, my little tree topper. I'm kind of lift up that little angel there. I got it at the thrift store. I don't think she's vintage, but she's got that vintage feel to it. I'm gonna bring you guys down because it looks like I have no neck. So I thought it'd be nice to do it up here with the tree in the background. Oh, and you can kind of see my little wreath that I made back there. So this is my whole little like office work area that I work in. So we're gonna get into the book. A couple of things first. One, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has sent their kind words regarding shrimp. Sabrina, she's having like I said, she's having a hard time. It's her first, like she said, it's the first pet that she had that was her pet, nobody else's pet. I'm trying to get the glare out of my glasses, which I could take them off because I don't need them to read. And I do that, I just think it would look a little, scary. Maybe I do need them to read. God, I'm getting old. Sorry, guys, I think I do need them to read. Apologize for the glare. But you know what? You know, and we're used to it, right? They kind of put them like that, like Granny, like on the edge of the nose. Glasses. Anyways, we're not going to worry about the glare. It's real life. It happens. We've got it. She says shrimp was her first pet. That was her pet. She didn't share shrimp with anyone like the dogs is the house pets and so forth. So she's taking it hard. Her new little dolly she got, Willow. She even said his help is going to help her a lot because she's now have somebody else to take care of. So there are no plans at the moment for getting a new gecko. I don't think it's something we'll probably do, at least not in the near future. So, we're doing well. And thank you for your kind wishes. I did put on my Claire's little Santa Claus nails. So, so far so good. I did not put any extra glue on them. I want to see how sticky they actually are without the extra glue and if they feel better. Anyway, so get to our Molly story. So we are reading the Molly Beforever book, A Winning Spirit. And last time we left off, it had been Halloween. Molly and her friend Susan and Linda had gotten soaking wet by her brother Ricky, but they wanted to get back at him, so they took all his underwear and dirty laundry too. I think that was a little bit much, and threw it out the window in front of him and his crush Dolores, and their mother got upset and made them all apologize. So let's get into chapter 5, 8 times 7. If you hear little feet behind me, it is Miss Sadie trying to get my attention. The child's already had 2 treats. I already have my cup of coffee, or I have my coffee, so let me take a sip. Okay, and let's get going. Okay, Molly loved to look at her teacher, Mrs. Campbell. Mrs. Campbell's hair was brown and so smooth and shiny it reminded Molly of dark polished wood. Most of the time, Mrs. Campbell wore her hair pinned on top of her head in a soft roll. But sometimes, like today, she wore it down in a page boy. I'm not really sure what a page boy is. I think it's kind of like a bob, a long bob, but don't quote me on that one. Her long glossy curls just brushed her shoulders and swung like a dancer's skirt when she turned her head quickly. One moment. Oh, I love my dog. Molly touched the ends of her own hair. sticks, she thought. My hair is straight as sticks. When Molly grew up, she wanted her hair to look just like Mrs. Campbell's, but it had a long way to go. Today, Mrs. Campbell was wearing a bright red sweater, exactly the color of six red geraniums that stood saluting the sun in the windowsill. Mrs. Campbell sat upright on the piano stool and sang along with the class in a clear, firm voice. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Then she smiled at the class. Excellent! Now let's get to work. We have a great deal to do today. Molly watched Mrs. Campbell write things to do today on the blackboard. When some teachers wrote that, it looked like a scald or the heading to a long list of tiresome tasks. But when Mrs. Campbell wrote it in round, even letters, it looked like a challenge. Wake up! Sharpen your pencils. The day is beginning. Mrs. Campbell expected her third graders to be on their toes. She often said, school is your war duty. Being a good student is important as being a good soldier. Mrs. Campbell wrote, Geography. Howie Munson began waving his hand wildly as if he was drowning at sea, and Mrs. Campbell were the rescue ship. Yes, Howard, said Mrs. Campbell. Howie stood up next to his desk. Mrs. Campbell, ma'am, don't forget, yesterday you said we would have a multiplication bee. Molly groaned. Ugh. Howie said multiplication bee, as if it were a big treat, like cupcakes for lunch. Molly absolutely hated multiplication bees. They made her so nervous that she forgot problems she knew by heart, even the easy ones, like 2 times 2. She hid her hands in her lap and crossed her fingers. Please let her say no, please let her say no, she prayed. Mrs. Campbell was laughing. You're right, Howard. We will have a multiplication contest today. I have a big gold badge for the student who wins the contest, too. I bet it will be me, Mrs. Campbell, said Howie. I know 'em all. Just ask me anything. We'll see, Howard, Mrs. Campbell said. But right now, please be seated. Howie sat down at his desk. He was so excited that he raised his clenched fist above his head like a prize fighter. Howard, said Miss Campbell firmly, please save your celebration till after the contest. Howie sat right behind Molly. There were 21 students in Molly's class, 10 girls and 11 boys. They were seated in alphabetical order at desks arranged in 4 straight rows. Molly sat at the middle desk in the 3rd row, in back of Grace Littlefield, the new girl who was as quiet as a mouse. Linda and Susan were also in Mrs. Campbell's class. The classroom was large and square, smelling of chalk dust, books, and turtle food. It was painted pale green with a high ceiling and a shiny wooden floor. Along one wall above the bookshelves there were windows. They were tall windows, twice as tall as Molly. It was quite a job to open them up at the top. You had to pull them down with a long pole that had a metal knob at the end. I remember those windows. I think it was when I went to school when I was little in New York. It wasn't in California. It had to be in New York. I don't remember them in California. It was tricky to fit the knob into the hole all the way at the top of the window, and you had to be strong because the pole was heavy. Then you had to pull on it with all your weight to make the window open, even a crack. Being asked to open the top windows was an honor that Mrs. Campbell gave to everyone in turn. It didn't matter how big you were or how well you had managed the job in the past. Everyone got a chance. Fair and square, her fairness was one of the things everyone liked about Mrs. Campbell. Mrs. Campbell's desk was in the front of the room, right under the flag. But she hardly ever sat in it. She walked around the room, and she talked or stood by the bookshelves. the blackboard, the piano, or a student's desk. Molly loved it when Miss Campbell stopped at her desk. She smelled like peppermints. Up close, her hands were smooth, square, and small. They were very neat and tidy, just like Mrs. Campbell. When Mrs. Campbell explained things like nouns and verbs and when I comes before E, she made them seem neat and tidy too. Mrs. Campbell leading the way, the school day marched along smoothly from the first song in the morning to the last dismissal bell. Right now, Mrs. Campbell was standing in the front of the room by the maps. The maps were rolled up in poles like window shades. Molly loved it when Mrs. Campbell pulled down one of the maps. The sun would catch a ring on her finger and send rainbows of dancing lights on the walls. Susan, Linda, and Molly spent a lot of time discussing that ring. Susan thought it was an engagement ring, and that Mrs. Campbell was engaged to marry a soldier who was off fighting the war. Linda said nobody knew for sure if that was true or not. Molly hoped very much that it was. She hoped that Mrs. Campbell's soldier would come home soon, and that her teacher would ask Molly to be the flower girl in her wedding. Molly would carry a little basket of flower petals, or maybe she'd hold the train in Mrs. Campbell's wedding dress. And any day now, Mrs. Campbell would come to her and ask, Molly? Molly? Molly sat up straight at her desk. Mrs. Campbell was asking her something, but it wasn't about the flower petals. Molly, your mind is a million miles away. Perhaps while you're bringing it back to our classroom, someone else can tell us the name of the capital city of England. Grace, can you help us? London, squeaked Grace, proud to know the answer. Oof, thought Molly. Everybody knows that. That's great, Grace, Mrs. Campbell said. On the map, she pointed to London with a long rubber tip pointer. Who can tell me why it's important for us to know about England and London? Molly shot her hand up before anyone else. Molly? 1 second, guys. Get a little dry there. Molly stood up next to her desk to answer. Because of the war, America and England are fighting together in the war against Germany. We're helping England. I know because my father's there working in a hospital. The Germans are bombing England, and my father is taking care of the soldiers who get hurt in battles. Molly stopped talking and sat down. She didn't really like to talk about her father being in England. It made her remember that he was in danger and very, very far away. Sometimes she worried that he might get hurt in a German bomb. She looked at the map. The ocean between America and England looked awfully big, and England looked awfully small and not very safe. It was so little in such a big ocean, so near Germany, and so far from home. Mrs. Campbell smiled at Molly. Very good, Molly. Thank you for telling the class about your father. You must be very proud of him. She turned to the blackboard. Molly's right. The United States and England are allies. That means we're working together to beat Germany. Mrs. Campbell wrote on the board, allies, people who work together for the same goal. America is cooperating with England because we hope we can get the job of winning the war done faster if we help each other. Mrs. Campbell said, now, for next Tuesday, I'd like you to write 3 paragraphs about cooperation and why it's a good idea for people to work together. Tell how allies can help each other. Remember to indent at the beginning of each new paragraph. I forgot all about that lesson. That's funny. So you get older. I forgot that you indent your paragraphs. Do you still? I think that's the proper way to do it. Woody Halsey raised his hand. Does spelling count? Yes, Woody, spelling counts, said Mrs. Campbell. Use the dictionary. Be as careful as you can be. And speaking of bees, it's time for the multiplication bee. Line up quickly. Howie Munson was the first one out of his seat. Boys against girls, he blurted out. Let's calm down, please, Howard. Boys line up by the windows, girls line up by the door. Woody, there will be no pushing in line, please. Everyone chattered happily as the teams rushed to line up. Molly walked over the girls' line and stood at the very end. Maybe I could step back into the cloakroom and hide, she thought. Maybe no one would miss me. 9 times 6, Miss Campbell said, and the race was on. Molly's stomach felt as if it were full of sloshing water. Maybe I'll throw up, she thought. 7 times 7, 49. 4 times 8, 32. Hardly anyone waited even a second. Molly wondered how people could slap those answers down so quickly. She leaned against the bulletin board that had a display of the plants on it. I wish I were on another planet right now, she thought. I bet no one on Mars cares about multiplication. The girl behind Molly gave her a little shove. Move up, she said. You're right after Susan. Molly gulped. Susan was next. 54, said Susan smoothly. All the girls clapped and patted her on the back as she walked to the end of the table. A line. Sorry, guys, I'm really messing up today. 9 times 11. 9 times 12. Woody Harsley squinted to the ceiling. 180 and 108, he said. Okay, said the other boys. Good going, Woody. Now it was Molly's turn. 8 times 7. Molly froze. The 8s. Her worst. She hated the 8s. 8 times 7, Mrs. Campbell repeated. Molly closed her eyes. 8 times 7. 8 times 7. Probably in the 50s somewhere, she thought. 59? Molly offered timidly. She thought she was probably wrong. Sure enough, all the girls groaned. Howie jumped out of line and yelled, 56, 56. 8 times 7 is 56. Why, Molly, Mrs. Campbell said, I think you need a little more practice with the multiplication flashcards. You better review your 8s until you know them. Molly didn't say anything. She walked to her desk and sat down stiffly with shame. The multiplication contest went on around her. Questions and answers buzzed back and forth across the room like bees to a hive. Molly wanted to put her fingers in her ears to block out the numbers. 9 times 9, 13 times 3. Nobody else missed a problem for a long time. Then slowly, one by one, others took their seats. Finally, only Howie and Allison were left. All right, said Mrs. Campbell. One more problem, and whoever answers right is the winner. Ready? Allison and Howie nodded. 12 times 13. Howie bit his lip and scolded. 156, said Allison calmly. Hooray, we win, cried all the girls, except Molly. They all ran up to Allison to hug her. Everyone except Molly. Even the boys clapped when Mrs. Campbell pinned a big, shiny gold badge on Allison's sweater. Excellent work, Allison. I'm proud of you. Allison beamed. Molly saw her look down at the gold badge and touch it with her fingers. Molly looked away. She pulled her 3-ring notebook out of her desk and opened it to a blank piece of paper. In big numbers she wrote, 8 times 7, 56. So I'm going to stop right there, guys. Our next one's going to be chapter 6. It's called Lend a Hand. There are a total of 12 chapters, and we'll get through them, like I said, before the end, before Christmas. I promise we will get through before Christmas. You guys all enjoy your day. If it's cold where you are, please stay warm. If you are getting those winter storms up north, if you're in that area, please remember to bundle up, stay safe. If you're in an area where it's warm this time of year, lucky you. I'm trying to find a bookmarker to put in the book. Lucky you. And thank you again, guys, for all your kind words and everything regarding shrimp. Your kind words in general. I love hearing about your dolls. I love hearing about your hobbies. Just everything. Your comments are so great. So again, guys, thank you for all that you do. You are special. You are noticed. And please be kind to yourself. Always be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. And we'll see you on the flip side. Bye, y'all.